So I am recording now, and this is our fourth in the series of webinars that we create to help people who are going into the system. And if you haven't seen any of the earlier webinars, on this sheet that I sent you, and you can click this same sheet by just clicking in the chat bot. You can see that I put a link there. It will also show up in a follow-up email that I send that includes links to the previous webinars, and these are live links. This will be a live link also when I send it out, so you could watch Preparing to Surrender, the follow-up, which is on disciplinary infractions, a very important subject matter, particularly in the era of the First Step Act, also the initial adjustment. And then today we're going to cover case management and unit management, which is the final in the pre-surrender webinar series. The rest of the webinars that I present are going forward. I think everybody should have access to this one, but our team members will be able to provide additional live webinars and so on. And it's important for our team members to provide that information so that you're not only getting one person's perspective, you're getting a lot of people's perspective. That's really, I think, important for people to understand when they're going into the system. Prison is a world that's very different from any other place in America. And the idea always has to be, regardless of what the system is doing, I have to be building a self-advocacy package to help myself. I never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do while I was going through 26 years in prison. But those strategies, I think, will help everybody in our community as well. I want to try, if I can, I'll just ask everybody who is to mute themselves, because otherwise we hear static and background on the recording. So if you're not muted, please mute yourself. And then what I will do is, after I get through every one of these sections, I'll ask, does anybody have questions? And you can feel free to ask the questions through the chat bot, which is at the bottom of Zoom, or you can unmute yourself and we'll talk openly. And at the end of the webinar, I always make myself available to ask any questions. So I'm here as long as you want me to be here. I'm committed to helping you. Today, we're going to go through, as I said, this concept of unit management and case management, because it's important to understand who these people are and what influence they have over our life. Now, later this weekend, you can see I've been working on this since early this morning. Oh, I can't share that part of my screen, shoot. Early this morning, I've been working on developing show notes, or I should say a page that will summarize what I learned from another subject matter expert. He doesn't yet appear on our subject matter expert page because I have to do a lot of work before I publish it on there. But this is a fellow who had 28 years with the Bureau of Prisons, and we spoke a lot about unit management and case management and why it's so important for you as an individual to learn how to advocate for yourself with your unit management system. They have enormous discretion, including becoming an advocate for you. And if you haven't read Earning Freedom, I would encourage you to listen to Earning Freedom, because I give some real examples there of how I use the unit team to my advantage to advocate for me at various stages of the journey. But the important takeaway, and I'll reflect back on a lot and throughout this webinar, the important takeaway for everybody here is to know that although I can create a mechanism or a roadmap to make things better for myself, I can't let, the Bureau of Prisons is not going to let somebody else use that same roadmap for them. It would be awesome if the Bureau of Prisons operated that way, but it doesn't. It is a real bureaucracy, and it is going to enforce its policies. And if you as an individual have not built your own advocacy campaigns, you can't use somebody else's. That's the real value, I think, of this particular project that we produce, is that we're always producing new content, and if you can't watch it on the video, we also send it to people in prison. And we do this regularly. So there's a lot of content that's going to people in prison with an idea for them how to use it to build their own advocacy packages with the unit team. And when you see, if you watch the subject matter expert with Scott Finley, who had 28 years with the Bureau, a significant portion of it in the unit manager in the Correctional Programs Division in Washington, D.C., which oversees unit management throughout the Bureau. You will hear him telling you as well, you have to be able to advocate in front of the unit team to get everything that's coming to you. The Bureau of Prisons may have a policy, Congress may have passed a law, legislation, the president may have signed a law, but it doesn't mean the Bureau of Prisons is always going to carry things out. So the more you know about this system and how this agency works, the more prepared you are going to be to help yourself. So what do you need to know about unit team and case management? Well, within the first 30 days, you are going to meet with the unit team. And you need to know who these people are, what's their position, what's their power structure, what do they do, okay? So the unit team really consists of a few people, including, and I'm just gonna skip through the unit team. It says, it is like the administration, it is like the entire warden, the entire executive staff for you until you get out of prison. So they meet with you first within 30 days of you getting to the institution, and then depending on your sentence length, they will meet with you every 3 months, every 6 months, or every year, depending on how long your sentence is. So if you've got a really short sentence, you're probably going to meet with them every 3 months. If your sentence is over 2 years, you'll probably meet with them every 6 months after that. But it's your responsibility to know what that unit team does and to know how you have to interact with them. So we'll get to more of that as we get through these various positions here, how you interact with them. But the unit team is the ones that are responsible for job assignments and living quarters, and also for things like designation, including designating you out of prison and into home confinement. They have enormous discretion. So to the extent that you understand them, the more effective you are going to be in managing them and in using them. So please, that was my really little opening here on the unit team. Now we're going to go to who are the different members of the unit team, but I do have my eyes on the chat bot. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to ask. So the unit team consists of the top hierarchy or stage is the unit manager. And in the Bureau of Prisons parlance, they consider the unit manager the mini warden. That should be the main person that if you have a problem and you want to try and influence, it's the unit manager that has that discretion to make a recommendation. Now, typically, a unit manager is not going to work or interact with an individual person in prison unless you've built an extraordinary advocacy campaign. I've given examples of how a unit manager became a very effective advocate for me at various stages in the prison journey. And this can happen for you as well. But you've got to always be thinking about who are these people? What are their roles? What are their responsibilities? What do they have to do? Well, the unit manager is like the CEO of the unit. So he's not really so concerned about people serving time there. He's more concerned about his staff who is supposed to be carrying out policies, right? The Bureau of Prisons is a major bureaucracy. It is designed, it loves its policies and procedures, and it loves chain of command. So the unit manager is always going to really want to speak with his staff, and his staff is the case managers and the counselors, which we'll cover in the bottom here. And he's going to expect the case managers and the counselors to carry out his directives. His responsibility or her responsibility is to write the unit policy, to conduct these things called town hall meetings, which are going to take place about every, 6 weeks or so, maybe even more frequently now, because we're in this era of transition with both the First Step Act and a new director who's coming into the Bureau of Prisons. So if you're going into the Bureau of Prisons now, you're going into an environment with a tremendous amount of change and flux, and you should expect that. You should expect that change and flux for two reasons. One, they're still rolling out the most significant piece of prison reform law that's happened since 1987. And the Bureau of Prisons has to implement these policies. It also has to retrain staff members who previously didn't have much concern for your life after your release from prison. Their total focus was on security of the institution. Now they have got a different mandate. They've got a different mandate from Congress and from president. And from the president. Somebody's just joined, but I'm going to have to mute you because you've got a lot of background noise. So I'm trying to mute everybody on here because we're recording this episode. If you want to communicate, please use the chat bot, or after I finish every section, I open it up for questions. And of course, I'm available at the end as well. But remember the role of the unit manager, and then be creative in thinking about what can I do effectively to influence that unit manager. And one example of how I influenced a unit manager early in my journey was by building these personal advocacy campaigns. And it resulted, I had a long sentence. I had a 45-year sentence. So when I went into the Bureau of Prisons, they told me I would never leave a United States penitentiary. I would always be in high security prisons. But effective advocacy resulted in staff members advocating on my behalf and pushing me from a USP to a United States penitentiary, to a medium security prison, to a low security prison, to a minimum security camp, and out to a halfway house at the soonest possible time. Now, in my case, the law was different, so they couldn't do as much. In your case, I want you to know that the director of the Bureau of Prisons now has discretion to send anybody to home confinement, as long as, do they do it? No, they have the discretion. That's a window of opportunity that I would have been thinking about when I went in there. Okay, I know they have the discretion. What can I do? What's within my power to make me stand out from everybody else hopefully in the entire Bureau of Prisons. But if I can't do that, then certainly within my institution. If I can't do that, certainly within my unit. Try to be the one that is going to get the maximum consideration to get the best possible outcome for everything you need in there. And remember that when you're in prison, you're in a total institution. They control everything. They control the people with whom you correspond. They control the job that you have, the place where you sleep, the programs you participate in, the food that you eat, the money that you spend, the when you get out. So if you understand all of that, you've got to take all of that into your calculus and be thinking, okay, how do I navigate for myself in the best way possible? And I will always be providing examples, and every week you will be hearing not only from me, but from our team that is giving you insight on saying, hey, what's working in other parts of the country? What did I do in this situation? And if you have a problem while you're in there, you're going to communicate with us. And only thing I can promise you is that there's going to be disappointment. There's going to be problems. I'm going to show you what I do when I hit roadblocks, because you will hit roadblocks. And when you hit those roadblocks, you've got to know, how do I can stop it right there and say, okay, that's it. That's as far as I'm going to go. Or you can figure out, how do I build a ladder to get over the roadblock? How do I get around the roadblock? How do I build a tunnel and get under the roadblock? That's what self-advocacy is all about. And the more you know about it, the more effectively you can create a plan that will help you, just as I created plans to help me. So the unit manager is going to be the highest level where you should start that advocacy campaign, but you've got to do it through the chain. And that chain it starts with the case manager. The case manager reports to the unit manager. The unit manager is always asking the case manager, what do you think? What should I do? If the case manager makes a recommendation, I would say that 9 out of 10 times the unit manager is going to authorize it. That means you've got the support of your unit team. That means the warden's going to authorize it. And that's what effective advocacy is doing. It's thinking about how is the Bureau of Prisons going to make decisions? How do I advance myself as the candidate to get through it most effectively? So the case manager. What is the case manager's role? Remember, the unit manager's role is to oversee everything: policy, town hall meetings, schedules, that kind of thing. And he reports to the executive staff, which is the wardens and the associate wardens. Case managers carry it out. They're your day-to-day staff, line staff. I think I missed a question here. Does your job have to be clearly defined as part of the release, or can you state simply that you will be working? I want you to build the most effective advocacy campaign you can make. And so you have to understand case managers are going to you want to make the job easy for your case manager. It's easy to say, I'm going to be working. But is that really the best advocacy package? In my view, no. I would detail it further. And what I can pledge to you, and I have a list here. In fact, I will show it to you here. I think I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. I think I can switch over here to my July training notes. You'll notice that throughout all of my stuff, I am telling people to document your journey. This is something I've done all the way through. I learned how to do it in prison because I learned how it helps me memorialize what you're doing. And you will see that Saturday, because I had this question yesterday on a webinar, I wrote a thing here. Okay, these are things that I have to create. Is we need to create a sample news support letter for my wife to send. I also need, I need to create a newsletter and sample release plan. So that's one thing you can count on me doing, is I'm going to create, if I were in prison during this era of the First Step Act, I know that I need to create a best-in-class release plan. That best-in-class release plan has to differentiate me from everybody else in prison. So best-in-class to me means I'm going to elaborate on what I'm going to do, what my work duties are going to be, when I'm going to report, where it's going to be, how much I'm going to earn, who's going to supervise me, how am I going to get business? Why am I doing that? Because I want to give the case manager the ability to take credit for it, okay? I want to be the case manager to say, I wish everybody on my caseload was as easy as Michael Santos. That's what I want you to do, Samantha. I want you to be thinking, my case manager probably has 100 people on her caseload. She's going to consider herself overworked and underpaid. And her program reviews or her job performance review is going to relate to how she is carrying out the First Step Act. That's going to be one of the factors. And you want her supervisors to be able to look at the work that she is doing and say, what a great job she's doing in release planning. Now, if you've watched some of my subject matter expert interviews with the former director of the Bureau of Prisons, with the former chief of probation, with the former chief of the Residential Reentry Center program, all of them talk about the importance of release preparation. Now, the irony is that all of the Bureau considers this to be super important, but the Bureau doesn't show you what does an outstanding release plan look like. What does excellence look like? So you can count on our team. We're going to create one. I'm going to create one what I think excellence would look like. And I'm going to send it to everybody we'll publish it on our advocacy page for those of you who have access to the internet. But if you're in prison and you don't have access to the internet, you will also get it. Carol, could you give me one of these forms so I can kind of show you? One of those forms right there. One of those right there, please. Please go to that bucket right there and pass me a form. Thank you. So this is what we send to people in prison. I'll take off screen share so that you can see. So like people, when you're getting in prison, you may not have access to the web. You may not even have access to core links. So everything that we're writing, we produce in these documents and we send them into you in prison. And we'll tell you, hey, this is what you could be doing to build your advocacy campaign. And I will create that for you. I hope to get it done by Sunday. I've got a lot to do this weekend because I definitely want to get that, that document up where I'm showing what I learned from the former warden. So I will be sending those to you in prison. But to answer your question, Samantha, yes, I would over deliver because I know that that's what case managers like to see, right? It's a government bureaucracy. They love words, sentences, and paragraphs. give it to them. They can copy it, paste it, and they can say, oh, I counseled Samantha on how to create a release plan, and she took what I advised her to do to heart, and it's part of her package. And this is why I'm recommending her for early home confinement or recommendation on CARES Act, right? Make it as easy as you possibly can for the people who have discretion over your life. So that's my recommendation. I see a question from Chad. I begin a 60-month sentence on Friday at Danbury. Will you be able to send that sample plan to those inside? Yes, I just covered that. I will. But if you go on Friday, you will likely see it on the website as well. Go to the advocacy campaign page, okay? And wish to start creating this really. When do you start creating? Look, hi, Lisa. I think you should start creating that release plan right now, okay? Because the more time you spend on that release plan, the better off you're going to be. Let me go to mute somebody. I want to mute somebody. The better off you're going to be in building upon it. Here's what's important to remember about the entire mitigation arc. And if you haven't read the mitigation arc yet, please, I would recommend that you do so. I wrote an article about it. What is it? And I'm going to explain it to you now based on your question, Lisa. Every stage in the journey, you've got to be thinking about, how do I advocate for myself? And I can just take you back. Anybody who's on this webinar, I assume, is going to prison. You probably work with other members of our team and not with me. But if you're on these webinars, this is for people that are pre-surrendering. But I want you to think back to when could you have started advocating for yourself, right? It would have been awesome to start getting good information before you were ever the target of an investigation, okay? Because if you did, you probably would have made decisions that would have made it so that you're not a target of an investigation. 2, if you were going to be charged, it would have been amazing if you had an advocacy package that would have helped you influence the charge. So hopefully you would have been charged with a kind of an offense that wouldn't have resulted in you going to prison. 3rd, then you've got this whole pre-sentence investigation report, which is insanely important. Not so much for sentencing as much as what's going to happen later, okay? But you have an ability to influence what's on that pre-sentence investigation report. And if you can influence it well, it's going to help you later. Then you've got to advocate for yourself when you're going into the prison system, which is what we're doing right now. We're building that package. But it doesn't end when you get sentenced and you go to prison. You also have to be working to get out early. You have to be working to have a higher level of liberty on supervised release. And you have to be thinking about the time when you're going to try and get off of supervised release early or get a higher level of liberty. So, for example, you could travel domestically. All of those efforts require different advocacy campaigns, but once you are sentenced, you've got to remember that the system is going to say, well, the judge knew all of this before sentencing. We need to start building a record for you personally about what has changed since sentencing. As one of our subject matter experts said during our interview, the Bureau of Prisons and the entire justice system, what it wants to see is incremental progress, right? Don't think about yourself, think about the system. The system wants to be able to take credit for doing great work. And although you don't, I'm going to speak generally here, you don't need to go to prison. Your family knows that you don't need to go to prison. You've probably beat yourself up so much over where you are right now that going to prison is not really the punishment. It's what's happening right now. Oh my God, how did I get here? What happened? Okay. Your job right now is to show I've been making progress, because the judge, the people that have discretion over you, they're going to be looking at how is the system working? And you are just going to be a cog in that machine. And your job is to be showing, wow, the machine is working. We're preparing people for law-abiding, successful lives. Build a record that allows other people to take credit for your success. And if you can do that effectively, you are going to have people advocating for you, including a unit manager, a case manager, a case manager in the halfway house, a probation officer, and all of that will get to a judge who has discretion over you and hopefully increase your level of liberty. Okay, my husband surrendered Monday, and I'm doing my best to learn as much as I can so I can. Yes, I know that you are, Lisa. I got married inside of a federal prison, and my wife was my biggest advocate. So the more you learn, the better you all become. And that was a great question. But let's continue with the case manager now. The case manager has a job, and that job is going to be to carry out the will of Congress, which mandated these tools. Okay, when Congress passed the First Step Act, it said that the Bureau of Prisons mandatory has to create a risk assessment on every person in federal prison. And that risk assessment is going to measure what level of risk is there of you recidivating. Again, I'm not so concerned on what you think. I'm concerned about what the case manager thinks. What's going to go into a report? Okay, where are they going to get the information for that report? Well, if you click this link right here, you're going to get that information on what does the report look like? How are they going to score me? This is what they're going to do right here. They're going to look at this report, okay? And that report has a male pattern score and a female pattern score. I'm going to show you this, and you're going to see it's objective, okay? It's an objective score. You click these ages on here, you just answer these questions, and you're going to come up with a score. And that score has a number. And that number is going to determine whether you are a minimum risk of recidivating or a low risk of recidivating. Now, I'm not going to take the time of going through the pattern score. That's going to require an entire different webinar, which I will create. Don't know if you'll see it in time, but the more you know about it, the more you know what's going to be done with it. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to ask you to go through another survey called the Spark 13. And the Spark 13 is going to say, well, what programs are going to help you? Okay. I don't want to make a comment on the value of the programs. I just want you to know how these programs the Bureau of Prisons is going to use these programs to advance you as a candidate for early transition to society. Your job as somebody who's going through those systems, or your job, if your husband is going through those systems, is to remember, if you're going through it, remember, my purpose in taking these courses is not necessarily to learn how to control my anger. Maybe you don't have an anger problem, but if they offer it, and if when I say they offer a course on anger management, and they're giving you credit for anger management to take the course, and you taking the course is going to result in you getting 15 days of earned time credit on your sentence, take the course. Too many people who go into the system that are typically, already highly functioning professionals or non-criminogenic people, they're going to say, I don't need this course. And that's the wrong attitude. That attitude is really focusing on what you need. Stop thinking about what you need. And remember, your job is to think about this unit team. How do they define success? They define success by putting more people through programs. And if you understand how that machine works, you can really, it becomes a little easier to accept that being in prison is really an exercise in humility. You'll hear a lot of people saying this is like an adult daycare center. You can hear a lot of things about nobody cares, right? I don't care, okay? I care about you coming home to your family at the soonest possible time. I don't care about boiling all the water in the ocean, right? That's just too big of a problem to say I'm going to reinvent the Bureau of Prisons. The Bureau of Prisons exists. Our job is to help you navigate your way through it the most effective way possible and to come home with your dignity intact and get on with your life as a law-abiding, contributing citizen with the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time. So I would encourage you to understand that's the goal of case managers. Their job is to make sure that you've completed these assessments and then steer you into programs that will show you're addressing these risk assessment needs. They're also really, their main responsibility is this whole concept of release planning. They've got to write reports. Your job is to make it super simple for them to write those reports, which is why I think it's important for me to create a successful release plan. But remember, the release plan is an iterative document. I can't write it for you right now because I don't know what courses you're participating in. I don't know what prison you're in. I don't know how active you are in trying to build a record to differentiate you from everybody else in prison. All I can tell you is the more programs you go through, whether you need to learn algebra or not, if you can go through the program and you make progress for it, you're earning 15 days a month and you're making your unit team look good. Make your unit team look good by participating in programs, avoiding disciplinary infractions, and also participating in the financial responsibility plan. Now, earlier, I told you in an earlier webinar, I wrote about the financial responsibility plan. If you have some type of financial obligation, and that could be either restitution, that could be a criminal fine, or in rare cases, it's a cost of incarceration fee. It's crucial that you understand your unit team is going to hold you responsible for managing that plan. They may not counsel you on that plan. They may not tell you other than say you've got to sign it, but it's your job to be responsible. Now, I've written frequently about how much I used to have to spend when I was in prison. You have to know if you're going to spend money, and it cost me, I don't know, $600 or $700 a month to live in prison. But that was because I was making use of everything. I used all the phone time I could. I used all the email availability I could, and I maximized my use of the commissary. But if you're going to have $700 a month come in, you've got to understand the Bureau of Prisons is going to want to take a portion of that for the financial responsibility plan if you've got a financial crime associated with your thing. Well, in my interview with the former warden, I asked him about that because the policy says that if you have any more than $75 a month coming into your account, and it doesn't matter whether that money comes to your account from what you earn on a job in prison or from what your family sends to you, it's vulnerable to being taken towards the financial responsibility plan. So he said, look, if you're reasonable and you go to your unit manager and you come up with a plan that says, I can afford to spend $100 a month towards my financial responsibility plan, that's going to be sufficient for somebody who's only bringing in $400 a month. If you're going to bring in $700, $800 a month, you should probably want to spend $700 or $800 a month. You should probably plan on bringing in $1,000 a month. And then telling your unit manager, I'd like to contribute $200 a month towards my release plan, the rest of it towards my financial responsibility plan. I'd like to keep the other $800 to start preparing myself for release. And according to the warden, again, this is your own personal advocacy, he will likely help you and go with it. And I found that to be the case here as well. I never spent more than $200 a month on my financial responsibility plan. I see a question here. So once we know what prison we're reporting to, will you have an idea or example of what courses we should be taking? It's a great question. Yes. And I have in the previous webinar, in fact, I can just go to it. It'll be kind of complicated for me to go to it. But in webinar number 3, I gave a link. I don't think it's at the bottom of this one. Let me look. Needs assessment, Spark, no. But if you look at the earlier webinar series on number 3, initial adjustment. In fact, I can try and click it just so that I can see. And bear with me for those of you who've been on an earlier webinar. I just always like to provide the resources as soon as somebody asks for it. So if you go to this link, and I'll drop this link in the chat so you can grab it. Okay, there's the link. Okay, if you go to this link and you go to the bottom of that link, you're going to see a list of approved programs. There it is right there. Now I'm going to click that approved programs list. And now you see First Step Act approved program guide. When you go through this program, you're going to learn about the First Step Act, but you're also going to see what programs are available in which institutions. Anger management, you can see, is available in all institutions. Okay. Let's just look at some that are specific. Like here's one that's specific. This is for female people. And so it would show it's available in these different locations. So when you know what prison you're going to, you can look on here and say, okay, what programs are available? But there's something more relevant to your question. Because you asked me, once I know what prison, I'm going to take that to assume you don't know what prison you're going to yet. My recommendation is you start sowing seeds. This is also part of self-advocacy. Start sowing seeds so that you can get to the best possible prison for yourself. And that's a question that's different for different people. If you don't know how to do that yet, make sure you watch the subject matter expert interview that I'm going to publish probably by Sunday. I've already done it, but I just want the former warden to look at it before I make it public. But I don't know what stage in the journey you're in. If you haven't been sentenced yet, make sure you're working to influence this at sentencing. If you've already been sentenced, try and influence before you get designated. And I'll get into this. You'll see that if just look at our advocacy page tomorrow, because I will be publishing that by tomorrow. There's another question. If during sentencing the judge stated restitution to be paid at a minimum of 10% of earnings or $25 a quarter, will he to pay more in his financial responsibility plan? That question is going to depend upon how much money you're sending him. So the minimum for FRP is $25 a quarter, okay? If you're sending him $500 a month, he should do more than $25 a quarter. He should probably go to his unit manager and say, can I do $100 a month and get that approved? Because it's, remember, you're always thinking about making things better for the case manager and for the unit manager. They get scored. Their job performance gets scored on how well they carry out the policies of the BOP. But they don't always communicate that to people. So if I'm going to build a self-advocacy campaign, I'm going to know how they're graded on their job, and I'm going to try and make it easier for them. Why? Because human nature, if I can help other people get what they want, I can get what I want. I want to help them look like a superstar in their career. So let me be proactive and say, how about if I pay $100 a month? If you pay $100 a month, you're probably paying more than 75 or 80% of the people in the camp or in the prison. If you pay $200 a month, you're paying more than probably 95% of the people there. You're in the top 5%. That's where you want to be. You always want to be the person that is doing the best possible way of doing what? Preparing for success as a law-abiding contributing citizen. The Bureau of Prisons respects or holds people in a higher standard if those people are showing, I'm working to be a responsible citizen, right? I'm working to do more. Start building that record as soon as you possibly can. If you haven't been sentenced yet, I would say start playing into your financial responsibility plan before you get sentenced, because that will move the judge. Those aren't my words. Those are in my interviews with federal judges. So learn about the judge, think about your case manager, think about your future probation officer. And if you do all of that, you can really build a better campaign for yourself. That's what I did. That's what I've learned from leaders. It's why I highly recommend you really start sowing seeds today for the success that you want to build in the weeks, months, years, and decades ahead. Because remember, this is a long journey. It's not only thinking about getting the lowest sentence, it's then thinking about the mitigation arc, getting out as soon as possible time. Then it's getting the highest level of liberty when I get out. Then it's how do I recalibrate and start my career again and deal with the collateral consequences of mass incarceration? Because there's a lot of them. And you always are going to have to be advocating for yourself. You can see how I have done that if you just Google my name. I'm always doing it. I'm always showing you these are the strategies that I used. And it's why I feel so strongly that other people should use similar strategies. Now, I was continuing on with the case manager here and saying they're also responsible for transfers, for progress reports. The more you can document your journey, the better off you are going to be. I've written about how I spent my time in prison documenting my journey, and I've shown other people how to do it as well. I think even at the bottom, so I'm down here, I think even on this one, I have a link to, no, I don't. But I created a journal that you can have sent into you, you can order, so that you're documenting your journey every single day. And remember, it's something I did while I was in prison because it helped me through prison. It helped me advocate for myself. It also helped me have a higher level of liberty when I came home, and I'm still doing it today. As you can see, it's a habit that I do. I document everything that I'm doing. Why? Because I'm able to show people that I'm working with, I'm never asking anybody to do anything that I didn't do and that I'm not still doing. I want you to be thinking about that. If you're going into the system, I know you're freaking out. I know you're afraid that you're going to be separated from the people you love and the people who love you. But what you've got to be thinking about today, you've got to be thinking about, I'm going to sit across the table in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, at some point with a probation officer. What's going to differentiate me from everybody else? If you can get before that probation officer and you've got a body of work, like a series of books that you created that talks about how much you've reflected on your crime, how you've reflected on what you're doing to recalibrate, and you bring those, and you bring a stack of these journals, or if you're inclined to write your own book or write your manuscript, and you go there and you bring it and talk about not what happened to you, but rather how you responded to what happened to you and how you've recalibrated, it's going to help you get a higher level of discretion from those people. And these people have enormous discretion. Your case manager has discretion. Your unit manager has discretion. Your warden has discretion. Your probation officer has discretion. And ultimately, of course, the judge has discretion. So the more you learn about all of that, the more effective you are going to be in advocating for yourself and building a campaign that's going to work. And what do we say it works? It works if it gets you a higher level of liberty. It works if it helps you build those bridges over the obstacles that are going to come. You've got to anticipate the obstacles, and you've got to be able to say, what makes me different from everybody else? Okay, because what works for Jim is not going to work for Bob if Bob didn't do the work. Okay, you can't say, oh, you did it for Jim. No, it doesn't work for that. And I've got an example there of it that's in Earning Freedom, of this whole stock market example. It's in Earning Freedom. When I was in prison, I used to, one of the ways that I was preparing myself for success is I started to invest at the dawn of the internet in stocks. But before I started, I really understood that I better get some documentation first. And so I went to the captain. Was it the captain? Yeah, I went to the captain. And I asked him, hey, I want to be able to prepare for my success upon release. Is it okay if I trade stocks? And he said, no, you can't do that for my institution. I'll give you an incident report. And I didn't want an incident report because that would have really influenced my journey. So I said, well, you know, I got 18 years. I think at that time I had 12 years in or something, and I got 13 or 14 years to go. I've got to prepare. And he said, well, open a mutual fund. And I remember telling him, you know, I know 10 guys in here that are in prison for manipulating mutual funds. I don't want to do that. And he laughed and he said, well, why don't you give power of attorney to somebody else? And so I said, so you're telling me that if I open a joint account and have my sister execute the trades for me, you won't give me a disciplinary infraction. He said, as long as you're not pulling the trigger, it's fine. And so I got that in writing, and then I built started building my plan trading. This is the start of the internet, and became successful. Well, they started to give me disciplinary infractions and locking me in the hole and things of that sort. But I had this letter, and so I always prevailed. I could always overcome it, and it probably happened 5 times. But one of my guys that I was trading with, he didn't have the letter, and they gave him a shot. And he said, but you let Santos out. He said, well, Santos had the letter. You don't have the letter. And that guy got a sanction. So that's the Bureau of Prisons. We'd love to say it's all fair and everything goes smoothly, and Congress said this, and the president signed this law, and the attorney general said this, but that doesn't mean the BOP is going to carry it out for everybody in the same way. And that's the reason I think every person should be thinking about, how do I advocate for myself? How do I build a package that will help me at every stage of the journey going forward? The more you understand that, the more effective you're going to be at avoiding complications, and the more effective you're going to be in getting the system to work for you, or rather advancing your prospects for success going forward in spite of the way that the system works. And that takes us, unless there's another question, no other question. So that takes us to the counselor. That's the other member of the unit team. Now, the counselor in society has a different connotation, right? You hear the word counselor, you think you've got somebody doing what I'm doing. I'm kind of counseling people. Hey, these are things that you can do to help yourself. That's not what a counselor's role is in prison. The counselor's role is more administrative, ministerial. They're approving visiting lists, they're assigning bunks, they're assigning work assignments, they're overseeing the unit sanitation and the people that have jobs working as an orderly in the prison. That's what their main job is. So don't go to the counselor and bother him with questions that are going to make you look like a crybaby, because that's how they're going to see people in prison. As another crybaby. Or they'll use derogatory terms sometimes. It's another crook. It's another, guy that don't do the crime if you don't do the time. That's the kind of counseling you should expect in the Bureau of Prisons. Okay. I'm not going to excuse it. It's just life. So let's deal with life and say, I'm going to succeed anyway. I'm dealing in an environment with people that are designed to keep a machine going. And that machine is not going to be governed around people like you who are really trying to get through it in the best way possible. They're going to be used to dealing with people that are trying to disrupt the system. And all of their policies are going to be geared around that. So don't take personal offense or umbrage at the lesson in humility you're about to go through, because that's what you're going to go through in prison. A series of saying, okay, I gotta think. Every decision I make has an opportunity cost. Is this going to advance me as a candidate for success? Or is this going to influence the way that other people see me or the way the system perceives me? Remember, all of these people on your unit team have enormous discretion. So be kind, be courteous, and be humble. Okay. Nobody needs to know you're the smartest person in the room, even though it's very likely you're going to be the smartest person in the room. Just understand, I'm going through this system. I can't cry about it. I can't complain. I can't tell them how they can do their job better. I've got to be thinking, use all of my critical thinking skills to say, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to make it easier for them. And one of the ways that you can do that is this second bullet point I have here called groups. Now, in my interview with the former BOP director, we spoke about those same programs that I was showing you. If I still have it open here. No, I don't have it open here, do I? BOP, I thought I had it open. Yes, this program right here. These are approved programs under the First Step Act. I asked the director, because I was really really on the offense when I was in prison. I was always trying to build something that would help me. I mean, I had a 45-year sentence, so I had to always be thinking that way. And so I asked him, could I, if I were in prison, create my own program and teach it inside of the prison? And he said, well, there's a process for doing that, because there's a process for doing everything in prison. He said the way to do it would be to kind of ask a counselor to look at your program, and maybe the counselor would submit it to Washington, D.C., so it could become one of these productive activities. Well, so if you've got a long enough sentence, and what do I say is a long enough sentence? If you don't have 2 years, don't even think about this, because BOP moves on turtle time. So, but if you've got 2 years and you want to really work toward getting earlier release, or 3 years, and you want to work toward think about developing your own program, thinking about developing a rapport with the counselor and say, hey, I'd like to create a program. I'll do everything. I'll teach it. I just want you to sponsor it. I've written a curriculum. Here it is. The counselor will look at it, and the counselor will say, hey, what's the counselor going to think? Right? It's always, what's in it for me? Right? Remember that. What's in it for me? Start every decision with that mindset. That what's in it for the counselor? Well, the counselor will say, wow, here's a smart guy who created a program. I'm going to put my name on it, and I'm the sponsor of it, which is great. Because if the counselor puts his name on it and agrees to sponsor it, you are going to be able to teach it. And guess what? That's going to be one of the ways that you're a bright light, that you're a positive influence in the prison. And when it comes time to recommend you for early release, you're going to be different from everybody else there. So I'm not telling you that's the only way. That's one of the strategies that I would have used to advocate for myself. It's always long tail, right? I've got to do a lot. If you want to grow an apple orchard, right? You don't just go out and say, I want an apple orchard, and go out and pick an apple. You got to plant a seed. You got to fertilize that seed. You got to make sure you nurture that seed till it grows into a tree, and then you can go get your harvest. It's the same thing here. BOP advocacy is long tail. Getting through prison and coming back successfully is long tail. So think about the seeds you can sow today by understanding these different people in the unit team, right? The unit manager, the case manager, the counselor. The way you influence them is going to follow you when you get out of prison and you start interacting with the United States probation officer, or a case manager in the residential reentry center. All of these people have influence over you, but the seeds you're sowing today are going to influence your level of liberty in the days, weeks, months, years, and decades ahead. So I would encourage you, just think about these things. I don't see a question, so I'm going to go to number 5, which is the Second Chance Act. Now, the Second Chance Act is a law that President Bush signed in 2008. It's a law that's carried out by the unit team. So back again, why the unit team is so important. The Second Chance Act says that the Bureau of Prisons can release a person to what's called the residential reentry center for the last 12 months of the sentence, or the last 10% of the sentence, up to 6 months they can serve on home confinement. So remember, home confinement is governed under the residential reentry center. Under the Second Chance Act, you can only go to the home confinement for the last 6 months of your sentence, but you can only go for the last 6 months of your sentence if your sentence is more than 60 months, right? For 5 years or longer, because it's whichever is the lesser of 6 months or 10%. So if I only have 3 years, the maximum home confinement I can get under Second Chance Act is 3.6 months, right? Because it's 10% of my sentence. If I have 10 years, that's 120 months. The maximum home confinement I can get is 6 months, but I can get 12 months. I can do 6 months in the halfway house and 6 months on home confinement. That's the Second Chance Act, okay? You would rather get released under the CARES Act, okay? Now, the First Step Act, which I have down here, also influences the Second Chance Act, because under First Step Act, you can earn these things called earned time credits. We'll get to that when we get to number 7. I'm just giving you Second Chance Act first. The CARES Act is something different. The CARES Act is pandemic related. It is a law that, or I guess it would be called a presidential order or something like that, that President Trump signed, executive order that President Trump signed after the pandemic. And that gave the Attorney General more authority to give the Bureau of Prisons more authority. And so the Bureau of Prisons was directed in order to reduce COVID amounts or risk of exposure to COVID, not necessarily for people in prison, but also for staff members in prison and the broader community, right? It's nobody's interest to say, let's get people out of prison. Okay, don't go from that mindset. I got a right to get out of prison. That's not the way the system operates. Okay, we've got to understand the system and say, how do I work within it? The system is designed to receive people in prison. It's not crazy about letting people out, but things are changing, and they're changing in your favor. One of those ways is the CARES Act. Because of the CARES Act, the Attorney General published a series of memorandums. You can see those memorandums just by clicking these links, right? You can click those links right there. You can read them for yourself. Here they are, right? This is what they say. This was the first one. This was the second one. This was the third one, right? And they give you these instructions on what the Bureau of Prisons is supposed to do to let somebody leave prison and go to home confinement. So there are these different factors. And then there are even guidelines. If somebody served 50% or more of their sentence, they can go to home confinement, assuming other factors. Or if they have 18 months or less and they've served 25% or more, they should go to home confinement. Although this is a memorandum from the director of the Bureau of Prisons, a guy I interviewed, and you can see him on our subject matter expert page, okay? It doesn't mean everybody gets it. You've got to advocate for yourself. Who makes the decision? The unit team. So again, very important for you to understand, how do I influence them? What can I do? And how does our team try to help you? We help you by continuously doing research that you're not going to be able to do, so that you could build a more effective plan on, say, hey, what's the Bureau of Prisons saying? My wife, who's my partner also, happens to be a public health nurse. And so she's always looking at the CDC guidelines. Why? Because the BOP is saying in its response that that's what they look at, as described by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. So we have to stay up to date. What is the CDC saying? How can we give that to you so that you can use this information in your own self-advocacy campaigns? That's what we want to do for you. Okay? And that's what you can expect us to do even while you're in prison, all the way through the journey. If you're in our program, it's to help you all the way through the journey, including when you're on home confinement, including when you're trying to get early termination, supervised release. So the more information that you know, the more I think we are going to be able to help you help yourself. And that's really what this is all about, learning how to help yourself. I didn't mean to go off screen share. I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that I'm doing this effectively. So let me get back to where's screen share? Oh, here we go. Share screen. So you can expect us to continue sending this information to help you hopefully qualify for CARES Act. Again, be prepared for disappointment, and be prepared if you meet a roadblock, keep pushing through, keep finding your way through. Don't let the Bureau of Prisons say it'll never happen. If I would have gave up and said it would never happen, all the way through my journey, I would have never done a lot of the things that helped me. It didn't get me out of jail a day sooner, but that's because the law didn't exist when I was serving my sentence. I've been home for 9 years now, and the law's changed. Now you have the First Step Act. Now you have the CARES Act. My recommendation, make sure you understand it and make sure that you're sowing seeds today for what you want to harvest in the weeks, months, years, and decades ahead. And that leads us to the First Step Act. There's a tremendous amount of information on the First Step Act. I publish a lot of information on the First Step Act because I expect that it's going to continue to evolve and iterate over the next 10 years. It's the biggest piece of prison reform, sentence reform legislation that's occurred since 1987. And I know because that's when I went into the system in 1987. So you want to understand it so that you can position yourself on how to get the best outcome, including earned time credits and how you can get earned time credits to reduce your sentence. It's reduced a little bit differently from participation in RDAP, which was part of a different reform legislation. But effectively, if your sentence is long enough, you can get a year off for First Step Act, you can get a year off for RDAP, and you can get earned time credits that qualify you for much more home confinement than is available through the Second Chance Act. So you want to learn about all of these things, but again, I can give you the bullet points right now. Be prepared for a lesson in humility. Be prepared to enroll in every course that's available. Make sure that you avoid disciplinary infractions. Make sure that you participate in the financial responsibility program, and make sure you're always thinking about how can I be courteous and respectful of staff so that I convert them into seeing me as a whiner and a complainer and somebody who's a pain in my butt, instead of make them to see you as saying, I wish everybody was on my caseload like Joe or Karen or Samantha or Russell or somebody else that's on this webinar. Have them see you as a great person that's advancing their career. If you can do that, that's the hallmark of success in getting through this system, right? That's very important to remember about the First Step Act. And it's also including thinking about your federal judge, because the First Step Act, and I don't know your sentence length, and this is, everything is relative, but the First Step Act authorizes the federal judge that sentenced you to take another look at you and assess whether continued incarceration is appropriate. That didn't exist when I was in prison, but it exists today. It's called compassionate release. Now, there's a procedure to get there where you've got to, first of all, exhaust administrative remedy, which is why I offer programs on administrative remedy. And if you look at our advocacy campaign, you will see those programs. You will learn how to use them. If you're in prison, I'm going to continue sending information. We will respond to your question, but I can't do it for you. I wish I could, but I can't, because the Bureau of Prisons, I can help you, okay? The Bureau of Prisons authorizes, the Code of Federal Regulations authorizes you to receive help, but you have to do it. That's not my rule, it's the law. So learn the law and learn how to use it to benefit you, and you will be far better off. I have some questions here from Joe. If not vaccinated, can I still do RDAP and all other programming classes? The answer is unequivocal yes. I gave that answer after my interview with Scott, that you will be able to watch that interview yourself, but as long as you don't have COVID, you're fine, okay? They're going to put you through the same process as everybody else in the prison. They're going to quarantine you when you surrender to prison. They're going to test you when you get out of quarantine. And as long as you don't have COVID, you can do everything just like everybody else. They do not the Bureau of Prisons does not mandate anybody to be vaccinated, okay? That's what I just learned from the interview yesterday or Thursday. Another one, have you guys seen a good percentage has been released on the CARES Act as long as they build a good case? Yes, thousands of people and many people that are in our community have been released on CARES Act. I want you to know the different role of our organization. I run the nonprofit. So that's why for many people, this is the first time you're seeing who I am. If you hired us, if you paid our company, one of the companies, right? You work with Justin or you work with Sam, okay? You came in through the professional consulting business, and those resources go to support the nonprofit. My job is to go out and hire these subject matter experts like the former director, the former warden, former chief probation officers. All these people, we pay them, and we pay them to become resources for us. And if you watch the interview I did with the former director, he will talk about how thousands of people, and I don't know how many, it's probably on the BOP's website, that they'll say 10,000 people have gotten out under CARES so far, and they're continuing to let people out. They will also tell you that although everybody's supposed to be considered, not everybody gets the same action, okay? Which is why I am emphasizing, please learn how to advocate for yourself. As somebody who did 9,500 days in prison, I speak with authority in saying you have to become your best advocate. You have to expect that there are mechanisms to help you, but you've got to invest in yourself. And if you do, you will simply be a better candidate for relief. You are qualified, depending on your sentence length, to do 25% of your sentence. I know many people that had sentences of 3 years and they ended up doing a year, okay, in prison. I consider that a victory. I've known people that served 5 years. They had a 5-year sentence. They did like 14 months, okay? Everything is individual, though. There's the law that allows them to do it, and then there's what happens, and that's not universal. I showed you, I could trade stocks in prison, but the guy who didn't go through the efforts that I did, he could not. I could work my way from a high security penitentiary to a minimum security camp, but there were other people who could not. You've got to be the one that makes things happen. And that's why these types of webinars are important, and the ongoing communication that we publish every week is important. I want you to know you can do it, but nobody can do it for you. I can only do the best that I can to help you. So that, I hope, answers that question. We're on First Step Back. There are resources there where you can learn about this. I do encourage you to also visit our website page. And I'm going to share the screen in case you haven't seen it, because I know that most people come into our company not through prison professors, because this is, everything here is free. Everything you're paying for, you can get for free, okay? It's just that you've got to know where to look, because I give everything away for free. That's what our nonprofit is about, helping to change this system. And I publish a lot of information. Right now, it's under these 4 buckets: subject matter experts, before sentencing, after sentencing, advocacy news, but I'm always producing more. I would encourage you to look at these books and think about how they can help you along the way. I clicked on that link right now, but it's slow because I'm using a lot of bandwidth on the webinar. But if you scroll down here, like, this is all free. You could be listening to it on audio if you want. Okay, there's just a tremendous amount of information that you can use to help yourself along the journey. And, there's, through this product that you're on right now, the only difference is that by you being on the team, you get more stuff while you're in there. I keep producing more and sending it to anybody who's on this list. And it will never stop all the way through the time you get out of prison, because you're going to want to get off of early supervised release, right? We can tap into our subject matter experts to help you help yourself, because all this, you don't need a lawyer anymore after sentencing. It's all about you. And that's why you have to learn about administrative remedies in the BOP, because that is the one way, if you are not getting what you're supposed to get, You've got to think about, how do I use this as a tool? But you've got to be strategic. Use administrative remedy as a tool at the right time. Sometimes it's important to lose a battle in order to win the real victory, which, you remember, never lose sight of what the victory is. The victory is to get out of prison at the soonest possible time and to come back to your family at the soonest possible time. If you always keep that at the forefront, you've got to be thinking, is what I am doing today helping me get back sooner? If that's happening, great. I'm doing good. I'm doing the right thing. If it's leading me in any way in a direction that may put me in the crosshairs of my unit team, I encourage you to think that through. And I was not a model inmate when I was in prison. I was running businesses. I was investing in stocks. I was writing books, right? That's not something that they always want people to do. But for me, I knew what success was. I had a long sentence. Most people don't have sentences like that. If your sentence is, 7 years or less, my recommendation is you really just focus on being invisible in there and knowing the rules, following the rules, advocating for yourself, using administrative remedy for appropriate purposes. For example, there are people that will use administrative remedy in there for the stupidest things in the world. For example, I went to the commissary last week and I ordered a ice cream and it came to me melted. I mean, all that's going to do is make you look like a crybaby in prison. And that's going to not result in you getting the help that you want. Okay. I didn't get enough French fries as Joe on my lunch tray. I mean, stupid. You've got to use critical thinking skills. Focus on the goal. The goal, get home to your family and get out as soon as you can. Get to a halfway house if that's the best place, and then get to home confinement, and then get off supervised release. There's a lot of stages. I want you to learn how to get those stages in the right way. While you're in prison, you have administrative remedy. Use it for appropriate purposes. For example, CARES Act could be an appropriate purpose. In fact, it's necessary, because if you want to go for compassionate release, the law requires you to go through administrative remedy. The last thing I wanted to give on this webinar was an example. I got a question here. The links you just showed us to the books and other information, will that be the information you'll be sharing with us while in prison? Well, I can't share that with you in prison. What I share with you in prison, just so you know, is, look, there's a lot of stuff. Like I just told you, I'm going to create a document that's going to say, hey, what does an ideal release plan look like? What's that going to look like? I'm going to prepare one for you. That's not going to necessarily be a book like this. It's going to be something like this, right? It might be longer than this, so it might be multiple pages, but I'm going to show you, hey, how would I do it? And this is going to come to you in the mail. Okay, at least twice a month, we send these policy types of things out to say, hey, are you doing this information? Because you should be. And here's why. Remember the analogy. The analogy is you're planting a seed today for an apple that you want to eat, a year from now. So that's what you're going to get in the mail through the email, right? You're going to have this email system. You're going to get other information. Like, I just did an interview with this guy. Let me see if I can share my screen. Hold on a second. Let me pull this up. Yes, because I'm working on this right now. So what am I talking about that? I'm going to share. I got to use a little technological wizardry here to see if I can share Microsoft Word. Here it is. Okay. So this is the kind of information I can't give you right now because I haven't finished it, right? But this is a subject matter expert I just interviewed, right? He was a warden. He used to run the Correctional Programs Division in Washington, D.C. I hired him for a relatively expensive rate to spend time with me so that I can help you. If you're in prison, you're not going to have access to this information, okay? But I asked them this series of questions on some very specific subject matters. Designations, scroll down, a lot more. You can see there's a tremendous amount of stuff here. Surrendering, and then go down, 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 go down. First step back, case management. So I created all of that stuff, but if you're in prison, you can't get it because you can't watch the video. So I gotta put it into words and paragraphs, send it to you, and not only give you what he said, but I'm also going to teach you, if I were in, this is what I would do because of it. Okay? I want you to know I'm not going to give you any information that I can't back up and that I'm not showing you how to use it. Right? I'd use an analogy that said, I used to use this analogy when I was teaching, and I would say, if I was with, let's say an engineer, and I'm sitting here and I give a box of transistors and capacitors and soldering irons and motherboards and all kinds of, and I put that box here in front of an engineer, and I put that box in front of me, in 2 years, I'm still going to have a box full of crap in it because I don't know what to do with it. And the engineer is going to build Microsoft or Cisco Systems or Netflix or something like that because they have more skill. I have a lot of experience in understanding what these administrators are saying and how do I use it. I'm going to try to distill that for you and show you, hey, this is what you can do with this information. Because everything in prison is about self-advocacy. So I want to show you that. Oh, that's funny. Tom's going to Schuylkill. That's where this guy was the warden of Schuylkill. He just left there in December. So you're definitely going to want to watch that interview. Although we don't talk too much about Schuylkill. But if you have specific questions, I can get you answers on Schuylkill. Second, what was I going to say? I had an example here on the webinar that I wanted to share with you. I get questions. Well, we get questions from thousands of people in prison, okay? I mean, there are more than 100,000 people in both state and federal prison that go through these courses that I create and so on. So I can't keep up with all the personal questions that people ask me. But here was an example of one that we received. And I want you to show you kind of how to interpret it. And it's on the list, but I'm going to read it to you. This is a letter we received. Good morning. In fact, I should share the screen. So let me share the screen in case you're not looking at it. Google Chrome, there's the screen. Here's the example, it's number 9. It says, good morning. I had my second team meeting yesterday. Remember what I said, that in the Bureau of Prisons, in the first 30 days, you're gonna have a team meeting. And then depending on your sentence length, you're gonna have another one 3 months later, 6 months later, or a year later. So I don't know when this was, but he said, I had my second team meeting yesterday. There are some salient points here. According to my case manager, my file is complete with nothing to prevent me from being released other than the time I have to serve. Okay, so what's the salient point here? That's very important because we've got a case manager who is currently telling you, I'm eligible for the best thing to get out. I just got to do enough time, okay? You can't do anything other than that. You got to do the time. The judge sentenced you to the time. Remember that. There's nothing in the way right now. But then he goes on. I am eligible for release to home confinement in February of 23. Another salient point. Okay? And then he tells me, I will have completed 25 of my sentence with a release date of April 24, and within 18 months of my release date. That's another salient point based upon the CARES Act. These are very important points. But then he goes here. Based on the information, I would like you to complete and submit a form for compassionate release. Okay. Well, he's asking for something. Okay. I can't do that. Okay. I'm only a person who can submit a motion for compassionate release. That's a very specific word. Okay. That's in the First Step Act. A compassionate release motion goes before the sentencing judge. to file a motion with a sentencing judge, only you can do that, or a licensed attorney can do that. I'm not a lawyer, and nobody on my team is a lawyer. We can show you how to do it, but you have to do it. But you also have to think. You have to think about, should you file a motion with your sentencing judge for compassionate release? Well, based on what this guy wrote me up here, that's not the path I would be taking. Everybody's got to make his own decision. But right here, I can see he's eligible in February of 23. Okay, let's take that into our calculus. Based upon my health concerns with COVID and monkeypox, I feel it's the right time. Well, okay, you feel it's the right time. Is that really relevant? It's not relevant that you feel it's the right time. It's not relevant that your wife feels it's the right time. What's relevant is, how will my unit team feel? How will the Bureau of Prisons feel? How will my sentencing judge feel? Let's ask the right questions. I don't care if you feel. I know you don't want to go to jail in the first place. I know that. I don't want you to go to jail. Okay? But I can't change the past. What's the past? He says, let's get on this ASAP. Okay, let's get the ball rolling ASAP. Well, you'd better think when you're going in there about the complications of getting the ball rolling ASAP. Okay, what's wrong with this scenario? Well, right now, I've got a case manager who's telling you, I'm ready to let you out. Just get through the time. I'm going to let you out. What's the right time? It's only 6 months from now. Here's the facts. The guy had a 37-month sentence. The guy has a surrender date of January of 22. Well, this is the end of July. So that means he's got to go through August, September, October, November, December, January. That's 6 more months. He's got 7 months in because he surrendered on January the 10th. So on 37 months, that means he could be going home in 13 months, right? Let's just stop and process that for a moment. 37 months, the judge sentenced you that. I can't change that. The 37 months, that's what the judge did. If you've got a victory path to getting out in 13 months, that's a home run. Take that, celebrate that, and take the victory, because you're not entitled to it. But you've got a case manager who's saying, I'm going to let you out on CARES Act as soon as you qualify. To qualify, you've got to be within 18 months. That's in 7 more months. If you ask me, is there a pathway for you to fight and advocate for yourself to get out? Well, that's a very specific question. My answer is going to be yes, there is. You could file a motion and try to get the Correctional Programs Division to let you out early. But remember, you've only got a 7-month window to do it. And you better know what's going to happen if you file that motion. Now it's going to be taken out of the local institution's discretion, and it's going to go to Washington, D.C. And when Washington, D.C. looks at it, what are they going to do? These are real bureaucrats. They're going to be looking at your pre-sentence investigation report, at your judgment and commitment order, at the judge's statement of reasons. They are likely going to make an assessment saying, well, what did the judge intend when he sentenced you? Did he know these facts when he sentenced you? Okay. And then when they do that, they're going to put a motion into Sentry, which is the database. Now, they're probably going to say no, unless it's really extraordinary. And now, if it's really extraordinary, then you got to do it. But if you're just tired of doing time, that's not going to be a good enough reason. If you miss your wife and your kids, that's not going to be a good enough reason. If you found Jesus, that's not going to be a good enough reason. You've got to be thinking about who these people are, and they're judging you, and make a solid case so that you're in the best possible position. That's my advice. I'm not a lawyer. I did 26 years in prison. I fought a lot of battles, but I knew which battles to let slide. Okay? Let's think about that old song by Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Okay? Let's navigate this way and get home successfully. Because if you chose the wrong path, you might be going back to having a motion and sentencing court, and then you're going to have a U.S. attorney arguing why you should not be getting it. I would choose to avoid that battle if I could. And so I would not be advocating for you or suggesting that you build an advocacy package if you've already got a victory. 13 months in on a 37-month sentence is a victory in the Bureau of Prisons. Not everybody's going to get it, but if you can get it, celebrate it. Okay. I wish that we could have changed it earlier. I wish we could have gotten the 37 months down to a year and a day. I wish that we would have spoken to you before you got involved. I wish that we could have done the PSR, but I can't. We've got to deal with the world as it exists, not as we want it to be. And you're going into the Bureau of Prisons. If you can understand that system, you're going to be better off. That's my position. And I would never ask you to do anything I wouldn't do. So I see if anybody has any questions. That's the end of my webinar for today. I always go longer than I do, but I want you to know I am available. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. Tom, if you have questions about Schuylkill that are specific, let me know. My email, my direct email, michael@michaelsantos.com. Please know that I get 1,000 emails, but I do have to have a follow-up with this warden. And so if you have a question about Schuylkill, I'll ask him. What else? What is a typical process for my family to send my contact lenses, glasses, or reading glasses to me? You can bring those with you. That was one of my questions that I asked Scott on my interview. And he said, if you've got prescription, bring them with you when you surrender. And watch the interview I did with him, by the way, because I had a lengthy session there on what you can bring. Other questions. Tom, to everyone, August 2nd, 27 months. That's good. 27 months. Start defining success, Tom. What's going to be different in your life, okay, at the end of this sentence? Start building that advocacy package today. Samantha, no. I meant to write that. I meant to write my address for everybody. I think I messed up. Let me see. Everyone in meeting. Yes. Michael@michaelsantos.com. If any of you have personal questions that you want me to answer that I haven't covered in any of this webinar or any of the three, ask and I'll build something for it. My job is to create stuff to help the team. Okay. And then our team is supposed to use it and share it with everybody as well. And then my partner, Carol, my wife, helps me send it to people. So does the judge ultimately have to approve early release on home confinement? No. Through the CARES Act, that is completely done through the Bureau of Prisons. And you could hear the director talking about that. He said, when we had CARES Act, we have the discretion to let people out on home confinement. So it gets done at the warden's level. You're still in the Bureau of Prisons. You're just serving that time on home confinement. So my answer, based on my interview with the director of the Bureau of Prisons and the residential reentry manager, administrator, John, who's on the subject matter expert page, also said that the warden can send you home, but the warden's going to defer to the unit team. So please be always thinking about the unit team. Next, can I bring my medications? So yes, you should bring your medications. You should bring your medical records. You should put them in an envelope that says legal mail when you come, and then say that your medical records are part of your legal mail. That was also a question I asked the warden yesterday or on Thursday. So bring those and give them to the medical officer when you're there. And the BOP, he said, wants you to use their medications. I would encourage you to visit the BOP formulary page and make sure that your medications are approved. But you should bring your medications when you come. Chat, should we have a differentiation between COs and the unit managers? Well, yes, you'll know the difference. The COs are correctional officers. They're really the ones who enforce the rules. We spoke about that in a previous webinar on disciplinary infractions. They don't do administrative work. They're just making sure that people are following rules and things like that, making sure your shirt's tucked in, your bed's made. The unit managers, like the CEO, of your unit, okay? That he oversees a case manager who's active in your programming and so on. But they're very different, and that will become self-explanatory when you get there. Tom, I am in the process of starting a business. I need to send and receive information with the business consultant. For example, I need to review my business plan. Logos, will it cause trouble with an BOP to receive business emails in prison? Okay, that's a very good question. And I'm going to speak a little bit about that, about business, because most people in here are business owners. Let me turn to the others and see, because that's a longer one. So if anybody doesn't want to pay attention to that, you can leave, but I will address that. Samantha, all things being perfect, what has been your experience with release time for people after serving 25%? I think that Sam and Larry on our team or Justin might be a better resource than me for that, because I don't deal really with one-on-one people like our team does. My experience is that's the law and the policy, and the BOP is supposed to. I don't know if everybody, I know that a lot of people that work with us get out on that, but there's too many people. I'm not the right guy. Ask Sam. He's a way better source of information, because they work with people every day and hundreds of people every month in our system. So please ask Sam, and I don't want to give you bad information. We have a year and a day sentence. Well, if you have a year and a day sentence, I know that in 3 months, you're eligible. And if you haven't done so already, connect with Larry, or Carol, my wife. I guess you do that through admin at, if you're no, that's for people in prison. Talk to Larry. Let's just do the process. So our team can help you. I think that the law holds it, and I think with the way the virus is going, you've got a very good chance. Okay, I know that you're entitled. That I can tell you. How many? It's always local. It's local, right? You've got the right. The BOP has the discretion. You've got to get to your institution, and Sam may know people at your institution, and that's where you need to get the information, not from me. I don't work at that level. I'm sorry. Tom, how do I get my contact phone numbers and email list into prison? Please watch the 3 previous webinars. I've written about that, but it's very simple. Just write them all on a list like this and send them to yourself before you surrender. If you're going to prison next week, type them all out, and 2 days before you go to prison, put it in the mail to yourself, and you'll get them in prison, and bring them with you as well. But just bring them on a piece of paper like that. Samantha, we did connect with Larry. He has been wonderful. Great. We have here. Excellent. Okay, so now let me turn to that section on business. Business. I got a lot of incident reports for running a business while I was in prison. I always prevailed, but it was because I did things right. Okay. You're not supposed to be running a business from prison. Okay. There's a disciplinary infraction for that, for running a business while you're in prison. So you have to be aware of that. Now, here's how I would respond if I were somebody going into prison. Let's just say it's Steve. Steve runs a business and he's got 10 people that work with him. And Steve needs to communicate with those 10 people. And those 10 people are connecting with Steve. Steve has to have the initiative to communicate with those people and say, look, I'm not allowed to run businesses when I'm in prison. But if you have questions, please ask me. And here's how I'm going to respond. This is what I would write if I were Steve. And Tom asked me something that's related to my business. I would say, Tom, that's a great question. I wish I were still home and able to run my business. But while I'm in here, I'm not allowed to run a business. So I can't make the decisions. But if I were home, this is what I would do. And then write that. Now you're not doing it. Okay. And that will work. So say, as long as you're not making the decisions and you're conscious of the rules, be very specific in saying, if I were home, this is what I would do. But I'm not home, so I can't make the decision. You have to make the decision. and then let your team know that that's how you're communicating, okay? I hope that makes sense to you. I really think you should watch, Tom, you should watch the other 3 webinars before you surrender, because you're going to learn a lot from those 3 webinars. And I really encourage you, spend a lot of time on Prison Professors and go through all of the links and all of the articles. Your job is to get out of prison early. My job is to give you the tools that I can to help you the best way that I can. And I will always work hard to prove worthy of your trust. And I know that everybody on my team will do it as well. But ultimately, the Bureau of Prisons is a big bureaucracy, and every person has to learn how to navigate it in the best way possible. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to wish you all a great weekend. And I will be publishing the links to this on our advocacy page. And I encourage you to watch it and learn. But if you have questions, I did put my email in the link, and I'll do my best to get you that information that you need. Thank you very much, and have a great weekend. No more questions. Bye-bye.